What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another Procreate tutorial where today we are in full Halloween mode and we're creating this ghost design. Now the ghost itself is actually scared in the forest, so it's a bit of a play on it slightly. Now you want to check out the requirements section in the description down below. It will take you over to my Patreon where you'll be able to find the canvas size, the palette for today's design, and they're both completely free, and anything else that you need to know for today's design. And all the brushes are built into Procreate, so you won't need any additional sort of purchases. Now over on my Patreon is where I post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month, and I've been doing that for years now, and the catalogue sits at nearly 120 tutorials at the time of recording. You can check out every single one of them over on my website before you join. And there you'll also be able to see that I've got a few Halloween ones as well if you're well and truly in the Halloween spirit. And then if you could do me the biggest favor and subscribe to the channel, it helped me out a bunch. And I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Tag me in your finished creations when you're done, and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, you'll be able to see on mine that I've got my stencil guide in play, and all I've done is inserted it as an image onto my canvas. So you do that by going up to your actions, you go to the option of add and inserting the photo, the PNG that I've provided. I just want to make sure that we get both of our main shapes exactly the same. Now what we'll do is we'll tap on the layer, we'll just triple check again that it's down to about sort of 16%. Now we're going to go to our actions. We're going to go to the canvas tab, and we are going to go ahead and add a drawing guide as I normally do. We'll edit the drawing guide. We'll change that grid size to 500 so that it is a quarter of your canvas size, and then you end up with a 4x4 grid. You can see mine, and then you can lay things out accordingly. Now let's just go ahead and create a new layer. Let's go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this tone here, top of the third column. And then we're going to go to our brush. We're going to use the soft brush under airbrushing down to quite a small brush size, probably around about, say, the 2%. We're going to use it because then we just get a slightly softer edge, but you do want to press fairly firm, and we just want to create this sort of silhouette really of our ghost. I just want to use the soft airbrush again, just so that the edges are a little bit softer. We can bring it down to like a 1% when we get down and into kind of the very bottom area here of the sheet that will go over the top of our ghost. So you can jump between the different percentages. It's not really critical to know necessarily the percentage. It just, as long as you can get something like a 1 or 2%. Now switch it back to the 2% for the larger areas at the top here. It's just that bottom area where we've got lots of little curves in the sort of ripples of the bottom area of the sheet. And then I'm going to loop that over the top. I'll drag and drop the color in. You have to drag from left to right. Otherwise, if you go too low with your threshold at the top, you'll end up with this white line. You need to drag to the right hand side by holding down until it stays within here and you get rid of that white line. Now let's go ahead and first of all, we'll drag that underneath our guide, and we'll drag from left to right on both of them and group them together, and we'll rename this group and we'll just call it Ghost. And we're going to keep the guide in play as well. We are going to go ahead and create a new layer and drag it all the way to the very bottom of our layers. We'll go to our colors and we'll get started on the background. Now we're going to grab this color here, bottom of the second column from the right, drag it onto the screen. We're going to grab the bottom of the far right column, and we're going to set our brush size using the soft airbrush again, probably around about 25 to 30%. You can go ahead and right at the top of your design up here, just create a bit of a curved shape here and a bit of a blend out, adding those lovely blue tones up, especially in the center. Now you don't want to go sort of past the halfway point really. You want to keep all your blue tones right to the very top. And then as I normally do, we're just going to separate the colors for the background. So we'll create another new layer. We're going to go ahead and grab our colors and grab the middle of the far right column. And we're going to introduce some brighter blue towards the top. So probably around about, say, the 20% range. And just up here at the very top, we're going to go round in kind of a circular motion, just kind of towards the central point, a bit of a low drop in the middle. You can make it a little bit brighter in the top of the middle of the canvas up here. You want a little bit more blue, blending it down a little bit, because our forest on either side is going to have a little bit more density to it. So these darker areas will occupy that space. And then you can go ahead and go to your layers, create another new layer. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab the color in the top right of the palette. And then we're going to introduce again a slightly brighter spot right towards that center point. Probably make your brush size about 30% if you don't want to sort of fade it out too much. But right up here in the center, just a little bit brighter like so. And because they're on separate layers, we can always come back to it and lower the opacity down of them if we want to tone them down. Let's then go ahead and start drawing in some of the trees. So let's swipe from left to right on these layers here, group them together, and we'll just call it sky or BG. I like to call it BG for background. We'll collapse that group down, we'll create a new layer. We'll go ahead and go to our colors and we'll start adding in some trees. Now we want to add in a tree that's going to sit right at the front. So we're going to grab this color here, top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brushes and I'm going to use the option of inking and the syrup brush. And I've got the size set to 26%. We're going to go ahead and draw in a tree on either side for our ghost to be making its way through the forest. So we're going to start up here and we're going to go all the way down to around about here in our little space that we've allocated for our tree. So I'm going to press quite firm and then bring that down all the way down and then let that run off the side of the screen. I probably need to widen that up a little bit as well. So you want to be looking at my guide now and just sort of taking a look as to where I'm positioning things. And then I'm going to let the root here run in behind our ghost so that it blatantly looks like the ghost has passed this tree. And then you can go ahead and draw in a little bit of a lump down here towards the bottom. That's like a root that's sticking out. And then once you've done that, just drag and drop your color into those spaces like so. So that wants to be your kind of general layout for the tree. And then you can go ahead and just create more branches and just allow your tree to make its way all the way up. Lighter pressure as you get towards the end. I don't believe I've got any stabilization on here. If I tap on the brush again and I go to stabilization, there's no streamline, no stabilization. So we can get really nice, shaky, wobbly branches in here. We want to have a nice forest look to it, of course, and nice and interesting branches. And of course you want your branches, your main ones anyway, to get nice and dense and sort of structurally quite thick as they get closer towards your actual main trunk of the tree. Now overlap branches, I always say this, overlap them. They always look great if you do that. And it could be a branch that's on the opposite side that just in terms of a flat facing object, we're just seeing them overlap on top of each other. You don't really necessarily need to go beyond the center point of your design. And you can do the odd interesting one that just sort of curves down on its own. A couple of interesting smaller little shoots on there will look fantastic. So the brush size was 26%. I'm going to bring that down now to around about a 9% and just create some smaller interesting little break-offs here and there, some very small branches. I always say this, small, medium and large sizes will look great for trees. You can introduce all of the branches, all the different levels and sort of growth in there as well. If you make them too big and only use big sort of branches and shapes and wiggles, etc., it can look a little bit too cartoony. So maybe you can just introduce the odd little one shooting off from there and maybe one from there too, just different levels to it will look fantastic. Now we do need to go ahead and create an opposite one as well. You've got two options. You could just go ahead and swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor. I must have a mark over here somewhere, but that's fine. I'll just flip it horizontally and drag it across to the far right hand side of the canvas. And then once I've done that, I can tap on my cursor and I could just edit this one over here. I could just grab my eraser if I want to, grab calligraphy and say the monoline brush, get rid of a branch or two, even just completely say disconnect this and then just do it slightly different. So I can get rid of that. And I will go ahead and also try to adjust down here as well. I don't want it to look the same as the opposite side. So yes, I want it to run in behind, but I won't have that long extending root. And I may even sort of chop away into here just to create another type of tree, but I don't want to do all that hard work again. I'll grab my brush again and now just go about sort of adding this back into the frame somehow. So like a big thick branch off of here, and then you can run more lines through. You can of course grab your eraser and just start chopping away and getting rid of the ones right at the very end there. You don't need to be sort of delicate with it in any way, and then just that sometimes is all you need. You can go ahead and just erase a big branch through there, get back in there with your pen, and sometimes that might be easier. You might find that quite a sort of annoying process to do, but I just want to give you those options so that you can pick and choose what you feel like you want to do. And as long as you maybe do something interesting and rogue, like have a branch that just does something completely different and maybe even a slightly thicker one like this, that kind of just gives you enough of a general sort of different shape to it that now you can't really pick up on that sort of symmetry of the two, widening that up a little bit, especially here on the rear. Maybe I could just go ahead and just really slim that down and just do the one branch, or maybe just like a small one like that. So they do look slightly different, but they've got similar characteristics. Now we're going to go ahead then and make our way backwards. I want to complete the forest. So we'll swipe from left to right on both of those trees for a minute. We'll group them together and we'll rename this and we'll just call it trees. I always like to create folders. It just keeps things nice and organized. In this group, we'll create a new layer, and then we're just going to go ahead and drag the other two trees by tapping and swiping from left to right, just above that layer. Sometimes it's tricky to drop a layer to the very bottom of a group. And we will then go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to move into some of the other blue tones that we've got over here. So for example, we'll grab this color here. It's the top of the fourth column from the right. And we're going to go ahead, tapping away. I'm going to set the brush back to the 26% range. We're going to draw in another tree. And all you want to do really is just run a straight line up and then come down it and make it thicker as it makes its way down. Hide it behind this tree. And then from there, just go ahead and create branches running off in the gaps upwards. You don't need to overcomplicate it in any way or really detail it too much. You're just going to go ahead and just run some branch lines up and through. So if I was to turn off the one in front for you, just as a guide, that's simply all we want to try and create here. So I'll bring that back in. And then of course, what we'll do is we'll do it on the same layer because it's only a very simple tree. We'll go ahead and run in another tree here, slightly different to that one. This one's got a bit of a heavier lean by the looks of it off to the left. And then I'm going to split that one here. I might even split it again. Now I'm going to run in some more branches. And we're kind of looking to make this area here at the top kind of quite dense with all the trees. And you can run the odd little small one off on its own like so. Then we'll go ahead and we'll create another new layer. We'll grab the last one we were working on and drag it in front. We've got this empty layer here. Now while we're here, let's just create another new empty layer because I know we're going to need both. So on this one here, just underneath the last layer we were working on, we'll go to our colors. We will go ahead and we'll move from that color to this one just to the right of it. So it's the top of the third column from the right. And again, we're going to create some more trees. Now these ones you can't hide in terms of actually putting them behind another tree. So you just want to sort of run it up from say here, all the way up to the very top. Just keep it simple at the bottom. Don't overcomplicate it. Just like a block at the bottom. And then I'll take a look at for positioning of that one, and maybe I'll run this one up from here. And I do want to sort of slowly factor in the fact that these are going to get further away. So I want to start making them a little bit skinnier. Notice how this one is also slightly higher than this one, which pushes it further back in our design. So we get a little bit more of an interesting look to it. So we've got not just straight tunnel of just trees. You know, we've got an interesting, to a degree, level of sort of detail to them where the ground is uneven. So little things like that can always look really interesting, make your design look quite unique on either side as well. And again, a couple of very simple little ones running off from there. We've got such a dense area up here, you don't need to overdo it in any way, shape or form. I mean, you can go ahead and, for example, run one right across if you really, really want to. And maybe this side then gets a little bit thicker as a result. And then we'll go ahead and we'll tap on the layer underneath. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the middle of the third column from the right. And we'll go ahead and add in our final layer of trees. Now these ones just want to be really simple. We want to just run lines up, make sure they're a bit thinner. So maybe jump to the 9% range if that's something that you're more comfortable with, just actually using a smaller brush size. And then you want them to get thinner towards the top. So you might have to come back down some of your trees like I have to, because sometimes it's hard to press really firm and then get really, really thin at the top. Do some in the gaps here if you can manage it. Maybe one over here as well, right at the back. Because we're going to blur these, so they're just going to end up like filler content right at the back of our scene. Maybe you could do one, say, here as well and get that really, really, really thin right at the back. And maybe another one here as well, just to kind of show maybe the pathway that the ghost has made its way through to get to where it is. So it's kind of this path here. Probably bring them a little bit closer towards the ground just so that it doesn't look like the path is too high. There we go. So what we'll do is we'll go to our adjustments. We'll go to Gaussian blur. Because this is the furthest back, we'll swipe from left to right and we'll give it the most amount of blur out of all of it. So we're going to go up to 9 or 10%. You drag from left to right and the percentage there at the top increases. We'll then go to the layer in front and we'll go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we'll blur that out, but we'll only go to 6%. We'll then go to the layer above We'll go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and if you're doing the math, this should be then 3%. And then tap on your adjustments when you're done. Now, we just need to add in a ground layer so we can collapse the trees down. We can go ahead and create our ground layer that's going to nicely cover up the bottom of that. So we'll create a new layer. It's above the trees group. We'll go to our colors. We will grab the color in the top left of the palette, and we'll grab our brush by changing it to airbrushing and the soft brush. Set the size to something you can control, maybe around about 20%. Nice and dark down here, really dark, especially towards the base of these trees. And then as you start to make your way just beyond the tree, you want to think about just lightly blending out the darkness, curving it up slightly towards the sides as well will look great. And you can just bury the base of those trees in the darkness of the ground. And if you create a really nice soft gradient, so you want it kind of really faint back there, you can just show endless amounts of sort of shadow, and also just all your trees will just nicely blend into the ground. Don't be afraid to also just to curve it up at the sides as well. Now we're going to move on to our ghost. We've got kind of the foundations of our background ready. So we're going to go to our ghost. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it, and we're going to tap on it and clipping mask it. Now, one thing I also want you to do is you've got your guide in front. Tap on your guide and invert it. So it's currently black, and if we invert it to white, of course, we can now see it against some of these other tones. And I'm just going to bring the opacity back up just a little bit to say 27%. Now on this clip layer, I want to go to my colors and grab the middle of the third column. We're going to use the soft airbrush. Now we're going to go ahead and set our brush size to, first of all, around about say the 9%. Because the first thing we want to do is just up here towards the face, brighten this up and add in a nice area of white towards the middle. When I say white, it's a light blue. Then bring it down to 5% and brighten up the top edge. So like out here, see how wide I am of the actual sort of ghost itself? And I'm just brightening that up. So if I was to turn off my guide now, we can see that we've got like a little bit of a gap here, which I can start to blend a little bit closer together. Just a little something like that. Leave a little bit of a dark line there. Just shows a little bit of curve in the shape. And then we're going to start making our way down and into these areas. So I'm going to bring back in my guide. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring my brush size down. Now you want to start off with about a 3 to 2% in here. So I'm going to start with that 3%. And we're going to start adding in all of these lines. And what we have to do is we have to lay out our kind of foundations to start with. So we want to show a few lines that are particular that say come down here. You want to start off really, really light. This is all going to be a pressure sensitive kind of tutorial really. So you want to start off really light and then curve it at the bottom and let the pressure fade out. Now I'm going to bring the brush size just down to a little bit to a large 2%. And then you want to start thinking again, okay, let's introduce another curve here, like in the sheet of the ghost. You want to keep your pressure nice and light to start with. We'll bring that all the way down and off to the very end. Now it doesn't matter if the sort of edge here is a little bit brighter, that's okay. We also want to add in sort of a general shape. Do we want to sort of have a few of these run across? And that's exactly what we want to do. So I want to start here, for example. I want to just blend across like so, showing how the sheet is being just tugged in a certain way here that's pulling it over towards that side. And it creates this really awesome crease in the sheet that's over the top of our ghost. And then we're going to come down here, fading it out as we make our way down into the tops of some of these little bits here that stick up in our design. So for example, I've got another little raised part here. So I can definitely go ahead and say, bring one down into there and then right up onto the top of that little flick there. We'll go ahead and we'll bring in a few more underneath the hand. And you don't have to run them right to the end. They can just hide behind another crease here, for example. I've got another one that sort of looks to be making its way through onto there. So I can bring that one into play. I'll bring the brush size down again to a 2% and I'll just brighten up, say, the outer edge here, because sometimes you can have the creases and they just roll on to the opposite side of your ghost. Now with the slightly smaller brush, I think it's probably too small. You don't want to go too small too early. We need to lay out the foundation. So let's keep doing that. We're going to bring in another curve here. Different levels of pressure throughout that will be fine. We want to run a line, say, right down from the light blue into, say, just behind that main crease. You don't want to overlap that one. We'll run in another kind of more vertical line here as well to show some of it's just draping down, but some of it is being dragged across. we'll run another one so it comes from underneath that crease and then runs in and then curves its way out. And then again, that might even cause a bit of a tug in the material like this. So you're just creating what you imagine is all of these interesting lines in the material. So I think we could get away with losing that last one, running that together. Now here we've got a little bit of space. We can run one here. Now the only thing to bear in mind is these hands here sit in front. So if we were to run one, for example, let's run one all the way from the top here. We want to let go really lightly underneath the hand and then bring it back in again like so. So it makes its way all the way down. Now potentially that one at the very top there is a little bit too bright. So I'm going to undo that one because I think I did it in multiple goes. So we'll keep that nice and light, let go, and then we'll carry it on underneath and it can just run down. Now gaps are going to be your friends here. You do not need to fill in absolutely everywhere. That's perfectly fine. But one thing we do need to do is bring the color down, and then we're going to go ahead and create a curve here at the top of the hand. We're going to bring the brush size down to like a 1% and start curving in a few lines here as if there's a hand of sort holding on to what will be our lantern. We'll bring the brush back up to about a 2% and we'll curve here at the bottom for the bottom of the sheet. And then that can kind of run up as well into a line that runs up towards the head. You can bring your brush size down to 2% and create like a line that runs here. Again, creases in just the shape of our ghost. We're going to go ahead and create another one over here. The top surface of this hand here, nice and bright. I'll set the brush size to about a 2%, and I'm going to bring in a curve like here and a curve under there. And this side over here, I'm imagining it's just like another hand, but it's just underneath the sheet. So I'm going to bring in like a line that maybe runs like here and up and into the edge of the frame. So what I'll do is I'll just turn off my guide for you so you can see sort of the general layout of the foundations of our design. I will just finish this off by introducing a little bit here at the bottom, a little bit of white along those edges, like a little crease in the material on the ground is fine. You know, we can introduce like little white spots like this where it runs up on itself. And then we need to start refining this. So we're going to stay with the same color. We can bring the brush size down to like a small 2%, if not 1%. And you have the option. You could create a new layer if you want to. And so you can tone certain things down or keep it on the singular layer. Now what we're looking for is where we've got some of these lines, we want to sharpen up the top side of it. So for example, this line here, the top side is this side here. It would be here if I press really firm. So we are going to go ahead and start to brighten them up. Now I can tell straight away my 2% is probably a little bit too large. So I've gone down to 1 and I'm going to go ahead, for example, and run all the way. I'm going to try my best to do it in one motion, a little bit firmer, and then again let it run out nice and light. And if you press too firm and you leave a little bit of a gap, just blend it out underneath. So that main line there, just blend out the underside of that crease. But because you create a nice sharp line there, you're now, as I said, sharpening up the design. So I want to go smaller with the brush size, but we don't need to yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and run in another line there, a little bit sharper, another one here into there. And then I'll go ahead and run in another one along the top surface. So that one, letting it fade out. Again, we're going to go ahead and find where we think those top edges are in our sheet. That one there had a little bit of a kink in it, which I didn't quite like. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this in again. Again, I want the ends to be faded out. So I didn't do a good enough job there. But I can always go in here now and just lightly blend that out. Again, we don't have to do everywhere. So just bear that in mind. A couple of nice little creases on there. Again, blend them out. In under here now, you could just add in just a simple line like this. And it's not something that needed a lot of sort of color like we did previously. It's just something new that you can introduce in sort of the negative space. I'll introduce a top edge, and you don't have to also follow the entirety of the line either. So you can let the line just kind of pop in. So this brighter point that we're adding in now, you can let it pop in and just let it then fade away. We're going to keep going. We've got to keep brightening up all of these areas. And it's more also just sculpting the sheet as well. We're sculpting the sheet and how it flows and all the creases in there and whatnot that we would see. Now I'm going to get rid of that line. With something like this, there's a lot of trial and error. You'll have already seen me undo a lot, because some of it is just also pressure sensitive as well. Each stroke will be slightly different. So don't stress too much if it is getting a bit stressful. We're already brightening it up, but we're already crisping it up as well. Look at how we've got so much more detail in here. Now at this point, you can then also go down to a 1%, like a really small 1%, and start crisping up heavy amounts of detail here. For example, you can go down the lines that you just created, sharpening up the top edge of them. Now, one thing I do recommend, if you're going to do that, tap on your brush, go to stabilization and bring in a bit of streamline and a bit of stabilization. Something like this, 40-25. Doesn't really matter. It's also a personal preference, just so that you can be super, super careful with adding in those crisp lines, and just allow Procreate just to help you a tiny bit with just allowing the line to get nice and smooth. When you get the really small brush size, it can look quite bobbly. So we're getting in here now, we're going to swoop that into there as well. We're going to look for some of these edges now that we can really define. Up here, arguably, I could go back up to a 1 or 2% again and just go onto some of these lines here that I didn't sharpen up, but I will sharpen up, say, the top side of this hand area here, where I imagine my ghost is gripping on. And I'll also go ahead and try to brighten up the underside as well. So if you do that as well, like I am, just blend it in to the rest of the blue. Lovely. We'll curl that around, we'll sharpen that up as well on some of those lines. And we've got some nice crisp lines in there. Some of them can be soft. You know, this one is still soft in there. You don't have to sharpen up everywhere. The two hands, I do recommend you do the hands if you can. You know, these top areas of some of these in here. Maybe a nice little sort of bit towards there, and maybe even a little bit of a line just towards the underside here, just to separate it somewhat from the body. Now, we also want to take a look up here. Can we go ahead and add in some crease lines here? So I might have to go to a 1% again and just run in like a bit of a crease line here with a slightly larger size. I could maybe even run in another one into, say, here. Just like these small little lines just help show the structure and how this ghost is just underneath the sheet. Because I always imagine them, some people, I think the sheet is part of the ghost, but to me it's not. It's simply a ghost is underneath it, trying to hide from the world. So we've got some interesting lines, all the different sort of shapes and flow to it. The only thing we have to do before we finish this is just go down at the bottom here and create some wavy lines here and curls and flow, where the bottom of the sheet, so about a 1% now, is just curling up on the ground as the ghost is dragging its way through the forest. So we're going to go ahead and go along there, just creating some curls and flows of the sheet as it makes its way along the ground. Awesome. Now at this point, we can go ahead and start adding in some additional colors in here as well. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer, but we're going to drag it underneath all of those blue tones we just created, so it sits here. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this purple tone at the top of the fourth column. Brush wants to be set to around about, say, 4 to 5%. We're going to add in some shading colors basically in some of the undersides of some of the arms. So we're going to get in a bit of purple under here and blend that down. A little bit of purple in there too, and a little bit of purple underneath this arm as well, a bit on top. Then on the same layer, we're going to go to our colors and grab the dark tone. So this color here, top of the second column, set the size to a bit smaller, about 3%. And now focus this more so in, say, this groove here, where we've got a bit of a shadowed area. We've got a bit of a shadowed area, of course, underneath here as well. We can blend it down and into the purple tone that we just created. But we're just trying to add in what is the darkest points, basically, of our shadows. The purple acts as a bit of a sort of midpoint, really. So just a bit of shadow there. Now you can get really brave and set your brush size to like a 2% and start adding in some shadows in some of these gaps here. Now, you don't have to do everywhere. You don't have to do anything like that. You can run a little bit of a shadow, especially around the very bottom edge. If you've got any of these areas here where it raises up and leaves some of the blue, add in this dark tone underneath. You can wave in some of these dark tones just on the underside. Here where it wraps around onto the right of the ghost, I'm going to go ahead and run in some dark tone in there too, and kind of run that over to here, where it's probably going to sit a little bit more in the shadows because of where the lantern will be once we get to it. Now, again, take your time with this. Don't add too much. Maybe a little bit along this crease here and maybe a little bit into, say, that one there. Blend in the colors together. Blend in it on top of that blue tone there, just to add in a little layer of depth to it. We can always come back to it. That's always a reminder. And now we get into the brightest of the blue tones. So we've added in some shadows. We're going to go to our layers. We're going to go where we've added the light blue before. We'll create another new layer. Tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and grab the blue at the bottom of the third column. Your brush wants to be set to a 1 to 2%. And now we are going to prioritize where we think the highlights are going to sit the most on top of these. So I am going to run my pen all the way down. So we're repeating basically what we did before, but now we're specifying where we want the brightest new color tone to sit in here. We've added in our shadows. We're now going to add in some beautiful bright highlights in here. Now I've got a 1%, but that's because I only wanted to do a small area. If I want to, I could go to a 2% and just generally brighten up the top area here of that crease and kind of blend it in a little bit like so. So we're going to keep going and just work out where we want to highlight in our design. So I've got it set to still that 2%. I can brighten this up, fading it up into that area there. I'll definitely brighten it up and down here, showing where we think that lighting is going to sit. Maybe I'll even connect them two together like that by introducing a brand new line. Let's bring the brush size down to 1. And that's simply just a particular sort of choice depending on where you are in your design and where you want to highlight. So if you see me change my brush size, it's just simply because I'm just trying to implement it in the area that you can see on screen. And just brightening up a few areas here. We'll introduce brighter line down here too. We don't need to do everywhere. Again, I'm imagining this crease comes across and probably blocks a little bit of the lighting hitting these areas here. So I don't have to add it in this on these two lines here, for example. I might add a little bit that runs under here and a little bit on there too. The hand is definitely going to get a little bit of color, so we'll brighten that up on there. Bring that brush size down to 2% or 1. Adding in some interesting new areas of lighting. You can introduce new curves in there as well. 1% again. I'm getting into some of these brighter lines up here towards the top. Now, just as a heads up, we also need to go ahead and set the brush size to about sort of, let's go to about 6%. We're going to brighten up the central area of the face. So just brightening that up, giving that a brighter spot, especially towards the top. And again, a little bit right towards the edges. So we'll bring the brush size down to 4% and we'll go over the very top edge, brightening that up. You can get rid of a little bit of that shadow if you want to. Bringing that back to a 5%, just sort of bringing in the brightest spot of the sheet, because the sheet is still white, but at this top area, it's where you're seeing the majority of that white sheet. Now, all of your lines, if you need to, can just run all the way up to the very top and blend into that tone there that we just introduced. So for example, I can bring in some brighter tone on here and I could let that run all the way up and into that bright tone and let it just bring itself out of the brightness and down onto that little bit of the streak there. And then I'll bring in another bright line there. That's lovely, lovely little curve in there too. Maybe I could introduce another one across. You want to think about how it sort of tugs on the material a little bit as well. So you don't want to do too much in there. And again, you can always come back to this layer in particular later on in the design. So if you want to brighten this up later, I urge you not to sort of go overkill with it too much. We're just trying to work out those general areas that we want to brighten up the most. That's looking pretty good. Now the hand is just the final part, of course. We're going to introduce a bit of brighter tone on these ones. I just need to do a better job of blending that out. Set the size to about a 2% and bring that down over the top of the hand, around like so. And then the underside, I'll definitely add some color to. And maybe I could introduce a bit of a curve here. Now that one's a bit too bright, so I'm going to bring that down as well. And then just run in a line just to show that maybe how the grip makes its way up and outwards for holding onto the lantern in a second. And then in general, I'm just going to set the brush size to about 2% and just brighten up down here just the tiniest bit more, so it's a bit whiter in the bottom left area there. So we will come back to that if we need to. Let's go ahead and create an interesting new layer. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it. So we'll clipping mask it. My Apple Pencil doesn't want to do it. We'll tap on the layer. We'll change the blend mode to vivid light. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this orange tone in the middle of the fourth column. Your brush still wants to be the soft airbrush. You want to set it to a fairly good size, around about say 8 to 10%. And we're going to go around in a circular motion here and then add in a brighter tone. Now you'll see that the red tones start to appear in the body here, and then the face starts to get a little bit more yellow. Notice how I'm prioritizing it a bit more over here on this left hand side, because that's where our lantern's going to be. We're adding in the lighting of our lantern, so we're going to brighten up the top of the hand here and also down into that area there too. You can add in a little fade of light that makes its way over towards here, but then this hand sticking out a little bit more with a 2% maybe, bit of a brighter spot on there. And then this curve here, I imagine, is really quite a dominant one. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce a bit of color that just runs all the way down it. And then maybe a little bit in these areas here, very faint, but this lighting just looks fantastic. And we can now just demonstrate where we think all that bright lighting is. Definitely down here in the bottom left. The arm, I think, would get in the way here, so we can blend this up and into here a little bit more, because the lantern's going to be here. It would land onto the sheet at the bottom, but that's where we prioritize this side. I'm using this big curve here in the body, and I'm now going to sacrifice this area over here, sacrifice it to the shadows, that is. So let's draw in our lantern. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go in front of our ghost design. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'll create another one and swipe from left to right, and we'll group them together, and we'll just add this as light. So we'll rename it as light. Now the bottom layer out of the two, we're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab this color here. It is the top of the what's that, sixth column. Brush wants to be set to calligraphy, the monoline brush. And if I tap on the monoline brush and we go to the stabilization, we've got a 38 and 57 in streamline and stabilization. I'll hit done, and we need to draw in the actual sort of main staff. Now I'm going to add a sort of quite cute curve to this as well. So I'm going to set the brush size to about 18%. And size, rise and range, you again want to look at my grid as to where I'm kind of running it to and from. And I'm going to create like a bit of a curve that runs into here, because these, I imagine, are fingers that are just gripping onto it. And then I'm going to make it ever so slightly wider at the top. Then I'm going to leave a gap, and I'm going to add in the bottom area of the lantern that runs underneath here. Now I can run it up to towards there, but then just grab my eraser, tap on my eraser and go to airbrushing and the soft brush again. Set the size nice and small, 1 or 2%, and we'll just fade out these ends so it just runs into the cloth and gets gripped by the sheet. And then here, fade that out so it goes underneath your little fingers there, and then just fade it out a little bit as well on the end of it, so you can take a bit of an artistic liberty there. There we go. Now I might even grab my cursor and just move mine across a tiny bit so it just grips in there a little bit more. Let's then go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and go to the empty layer above. And then on this layer, we're going to go ahead and we'll keep the brush size. So we're going to go back to our brush. We'll set the brush size a little bit lower, about sort of 7%. And then we're going to go ahead. I've just rotated my canvas just a little bit so I can draw in a bit of an ellipse here for what will be the base of the lantern. That's fine. You just want something flat like that, and you can just move it across to the right a tiny bit so that the staff itself runs into the bottom. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to tap on the layer underneath, which was the actual main staff. We'll create a new layer. On this layer, we're going to draw in the 4 columns for our actual lantern. So we're going to draw in a line here. Hold your pen down so you can angle the line slightly outwards. And then from there, go a little bit inwards and draw in another one slightly higher, leaning ever so slightly to the left compared. And then do the same. Hold on the outside edge to a similar kind of height. And then again, similar kind of gap, draw in another one slightly more upright towards this point here. So you should have something like this. We'll then go to our layers. We'll create a new layer. We'll then go ahead and draw in the top shape here. So you kind of want to connect those two sort of areas of the lines together just to create that line there. And then from there, you can create like a curve up and into a point at the very top and let that overhang a little bit so that the top sort of, I want to say canopy, but it's not really a canopy, would just hang over and then drag and drop the color into that space. Now we can get into lighting. You've got all the shapes of your lantern. We can now go ahead and light it. So we're going to go to our layers. We are going to go ahead and create a new layer. Now we do need to go ahead then and grab these 3 layers. So the staff, the lines, and the little top of the lantern above in this group so that this new layer here sits towards the bottom. We're going to go ahead and set the blend mode of this to the option of add. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the yellow tone. So we're going to grab this color here, bottom of the 6th column. We're going to go to our brush, airbrushing, and the soft brush. And you want the size set to something quite small, 1 or 2% really. The first thing you want to do is in the center here, very lightly, draw in a sort of rectangular kind of glow, and then you can brighten up the center of it. So you can bring that brush size down to like a 1 or 2% and press in really, really firm if you want, just to brighten up the central area of that glow. Then with a 1 or 2% again, we want to kind of just run our pen down the edge of what would be the glass. So I'm going to go a bit larger, about 2%. Come down here. I'm going to go along the top, down here, along the bottom. I'll bring the brush size down to a 1%, and then I'm going to do the same in here as well. So just down the edges, like so, round the top, to kind of show all those panels, just getting some lighting, a little bit on the top edge, like so. So just varying it up. That should then start to look like glass when you zoom all the way out. Now we'll go ahead and add a glow to this. So we're going to go in this group to the top and create a new layer. We're going to set the blend mode of that layer to the option of hard light. And then we're going to increase the opacity up to around about, say, 20%. And you want to tap a few times until you get this kind of very light kind of glow from that area. You don't want to make it too bright, but you do want that kind of warm tone to it. Now, optionally, you can then also go ahead and create another new layer and set that to add. Bring the brush size right back down. And then we could go in here and just brighten up the center point of our lantern with this kind of really over the top now brighter source in the middle. And then that optionally is up to you whether or not you just brightened up a little bit of the glass here and there. Now don't forget you were at the very top of your layers. So if you were to add in a brighter point here, it's all manual. If I draw on top of the lines there, you can see it just pops in. So just bear that in mind. You need to draw within what is essentially the glass here. So you can go ahead and add in a little bit towards the bottom maybe. And then maybe a little bit more on this outer edge over here where the light maybe bounces across. Maybe a little bit down there too. So just fun little elements there to create this really awesome glass kind of look to it. Now that is obviously the light that bounces onto our ghost. So you want to kind of make it as bright as you think is necessary to brighten the ghost. Now we're going to add some highlight quickly to the top of the lantern. So we'll go ahead to this layer here. We'll go ahead and first of all, we'll just tap on it and we will alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab the color tone here, the middle of the 6th column. Your brush wants to be set to 1 or 2%, and we just want to brighten up the top edge here, and then a little bit of a kind of whoop, whoop across, so a little bit of an angle to it, and then a little bit of an edge light towards that side there. And then maybe a little bit more color just in that top area here, maybe a bit of a straight line. And then we'll create one additional layer for it. We'll create a new layer, we'll tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll set the blend mode from normal to add, and we will just brighten up the edges of it. So we'll set the same color just down to a 1% now on the brush size. And we're just going to brighten up the top area here. But this is being lit from above from our sky, you know, the moonlight potentially. So it's not going to be sort of, you know, quite hectically lit. It's just going to be very faint almost, just a little bit more lighting on there, just coming from above. Lovely. And your lantern is now completely done. Let's go ahead and add in an expression to our ghost. So we're going to go ahead and collapse our light down. You can turn it on and off just to see the difference, but also it's up to you. You can tap on it and flatten it into one layer if you're struggling with your layers. I'd urge you to keep it if you can though. Now this empty layer, we want to create an empty layer in our ghost group, should I say. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and grab this color here, top of the 5th column. Your brush wants to be set to calligraphy and the monoline brush. Size, you can keep it around about, say, a 10 to 15% range. We're going to draw in an ellipse for an eye. So we're going to go ahead and draw in an ellipse like so. You can decide what sort of shape and scale you want for your eye, and also maybe a bit of a tilt outwards potentially at the top, and drag and drop your color in. And then we'll grab our eraser. We'll make sure our eraser is set to calligraphy and the monoline brush. And I'm just going to simply chop away at the bottom here like this. Now you might want to do this a few times just to see what kind of expression you can get out of the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and swipe it to the left and duplicate it now. Grab my cursor and flip it horizontally and move it across to the opposite side. You can see these lines pop in if you have snapping turned on in the bottom left here, which if I get to this point here, those blue lines let me know I've moved completely parallel to the opposite side. So to the previous shape, I'm now parallel. I can go ahead and tap on my cursor when I'm done. I can zoom out. Now those ones are probably a little bit far apart for me. I want it a little bit smaller and closer. And then I can go ahead and create another new layer. I'll go to my brush again. And I'm just going to draw in a very simple mouth. Now the mouth just simply needs to be a bit of a curve upside down, and then just triangulate it at the middle there. So create a bit of a triangle up towards that point. And there you go. Your ghost is now sort of giving you off that a little bit of a scared sort of impression. Now you can exaggerate the mouth even higher like so and make it even more interesting to look at. I would grab my cursor and move it a lot closer to the eyes. And to be honest, the whole face itself, I would probably go ahead and swipe from left to right on all of those elements for the face. Grab my cursor and just scale it down in size and move it back into the middle again. And just mess around with it, maybe slightly off to the left, maybe just whatever you think will look good for your ghost and the positioning of it. Now, again, I would urge you to keep these layers separate just in case you like certain elements, but do sort of try a few different expressions potentially for your ghost. Now at this point, we can also add in another layer that just reflects that lighting a little bit more. So we're going to go down to this stack here that is clipped to the ghost shape, and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and tap on it and clipping mask it and change the blend mode of this one all the way towards the very bottom. It's color. We're going to go to our colors, tap on it and grab the yellowish tone here, bottom of the, that's bottom of the 5th column. Your brush wants to be set to airbrushing again and the soft brush, and set that size to around about, say, 8 to 10%. And just over here on the left, you can start to draw in a bit more yellow here on the left of your design. Bring the brush size down to 4% and yellow up some of these areas here. So you can just add in a little bit more on top of some of these areas, say the top of the sheets there. You can run in a bit more yellow here as well if you want to, just so that you've got a blend between those kind of purpley tones we created and the yellow of the actual light source as well. Because of course the light source, if we were to bring that down to 1 or 2%, would be brightening up all of these areas here, especially the top of the hand here and the top of the fingers, and top of up here as well. A couple of these lines here should lose their color and be more yellow because of course it's been lit from that side. Now let's go ahead and dramatize the lighting just a tad more before we're finished with our ghost. So we'll create a new layer, we'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors. We're going to grab the top of the 2nd column and the soft airbrush again, but we're going to use it very faintly at around about 7%, if not smaller, sorry, about sort of 6%. I'm going to just generally darken up this area of the ghost. I want this area here to be a lot darker underneath the arm there as well. Just this right hand side of the design can just have a much darker look to it. Run it round at the bottom as well. So run it all the way around so it kind of gets quite dark towards the ground as well. And then you can go ahead and go to the layer, tap on it and change its blend mode to multiply right at the very top. So you scroll up to get to multiply and you can see the difference. So maybe at this point you might have to undo what you just drew, but we want to just dramatize the shadows a bit more. And so I might even darken up just in there a tiny bit as well. So you can take a look at your design, pick and choose where you want to darken, and maybe even create a second layer for your multiply as well and go again and darken it up a step further. It's up to you how dramatic you want it to look. I'm going to darken up the right hand side of the arm there as well, just to fade that out a tiny bit more. You want to send everybody's attention this way towards the light source. Now let's go ahead and add in some lighting to the trees and the ground. So we'll start with the trees. Now your ghost to a degree is done. You can tap on it and flatten it if you wish, but of course you won't be able to make any easy changes to it. So just bear that in mind. Now we're going to go to the trees group and the left-hand tree. over here. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it. So it's this dark tree here. If I turn it on and off, we'll tap on it and create a clipping mask to it. Now, I want you just to temporarily turn off your ground layer here, which was that dark gradient at the bottom, just so that you can see your tree. Now on this layer, we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle color in the far left column. And your brush wants to be set to the option of organic. And we're going to use the twig brush. I've got the twig brush set to 12%. I love this brush for trees. And what you're doing is you're looking for like your root here, for example. You're following this up and creating curves and flow, how it just runs up and into the tree body. You can tap and let go to create like layers to the kind of bark of the tree. And then maybe this root comes flying in from here across onto there, and just creating interesting avenues for your tree and the curves of it. And then we want to lay out basically the right hand side will of course all be the brightest because that's where our light source is. So I'm just running in all of these random little lines through the tree. Now it might be a little bit tricky to see on camera, so I might have brightened it up in the edit, but you'll definitely be able to see it on your screen. You're just introducing lots and lots of grooves in here. Now you don't want to make your way over to the left hand side of the tree too much at all. You want to focus all your attention just towards this right side, up and into a little bit up towards this top area of the tree. If you think some of those branches would get a little bit of light underneath them, you can tap and drag in straight lines, curved lines, twists, all sorts. The twig brush will give you so much detail and intricacy of your tree. And we'll run up a tiny bit up towards that area there, and maybe a little bit on the underside of that branch there. That's as far as I want to go with it. I want to leave certain areas a little bit darker, sacrificing them again to the shadows. So a little something like this. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. We're going to go ahead and tap on the layer we were just working on and tap on it and select it. So tap on select. And then once you've done that, make sure color fill down here is grayed out like mine. Then go to your layer, your new layer above, and tap on it and add a mask. So what you've done is you've selected all of the lines that we just drew. I'll tap on my selection tool because I'm done. And then we've gone ahead and said to Procreate, I want to only draw within those spaces. So I'm going to select everything I've just drawn and then create a mask on this layer, which prevents me from drawing outside of those lines. Now, normally you'd use a clipping mask, but because this is clipped already to another shape, you can't do that. So this little trick helps you kind of clip within a clip, if that makes sense. Now on this empty layer here, we're going to go ahead and make sure you're on the layer here, not the mask. And your color wants to be this color here. It's the bottom of that first column. And then you're going to go ahead with the twig brush and brighten up the right hand side and a few of those areas there that you think are definitely going to get the most amount of light from our lantern. So a little bit of the light just trailing into the body along that root there, for example. Don't do everywhere, but just little areas here and there that definitely get in. So it's a little bit more on the right hand side of our tree more so. And then we'll go to our layers. We'll go ahead and tap on the base shape for the tree, tap on it and just alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of it using the same color, and our brush needs to go back to airbrushing in the soft brush. You might have to do this a couple of times just to get it right, but you just want to lightly blend in some color on there. Now it looks like the layer is not alpha locked, so I'll alpha lock it. And then we'll go ahead and just blend in some light on the side of the tree, keeping it nice and light like so. Just a little bit of extra color and general color to the tree. Now at this point, I don't want you to have to necessarily do all that again. So what you could do is you can go ahead and these layers up above that are clipped, just pinch them together onto one layer. So that was all of your twig line work. Swipe it to the left and duplicate it and drag it above and onto the tree on the right hand side. Tap on it, clipping mask it. So it's clipped to the right hand side tree now. So if we go to our cursor, we flip it horizontally and move it across. To a degree, you might see some of those lines pop in and actually fit the tree. Now, we're doing it like this because, one, I didn't want to do the work again, but also this right-hand side tree is not close to the lantern enough to brighten it up. So what we can do is we can just simply go to the layer that's clipped now to that right-hand side tree, tap on it and bring its opacity right down. So if we went down to 34%, for example, it's so faint that we didn't want to have to draw that in. You can barely see it on camera. In fact, if I move it across, you could tap on it and bring it up a tiny bit to say 50, but you want to keep it nice and faint because the ghost would be blocking it. We also want that dark aesthetic. Now earlier on I got you to turn off your ground down here, which was this big dark gradient. Turn it back on and then just grab it and move it into the trees group, but behind those two trees at the front. So you can see those were the two trees right here at the front, and then you've got the ground here. So we've now got it set in the right position. We're going to create another new layer and swipe from left to right on the ground in this new layer and group it and call it ground. So you've got the ground group now inside the tree group, just as a heads up. Now what we'll do is we'll go to this new empty layer. We'll go to our colors and grab the middle of the first column. You're going to use the soft airbrush again, probably around about 10%, and you're just going to lighten up the ground a little bit in here, mainly just down in front of the ghost and a little bit off towards the left. Nothing too intense, just nice and faded off towards the right hand side. Now I probably need to brighten mine up just a little bit more because I want to have some color in the ground. There's something like this. Then you're going to want to go to your layers, create another new layer. Go to your colors and grab the top of the first column. We'll go to our brush. We will go to artistic and the leatherwood brush. I've got the brush opacity set to 57% and the size about 3%. And then what I want you to do is just run your pen through light pressures, heavy pressures, if not slightly higher with the brush size as well. Just run a 3% through here, wiggles in certain areas just to break up the ground. In fact, let's go even bigger than that. Let's go up to a 6% around the base of the tree. I'm just going to tap and drag out a little bit. I will tap and drag underneath our ghost just to darken up underneath there. And I'm just running in slightly angled lines downwards just to point down in towards the sort of center of our design, as if the ground kind of curves a bit. And just taking away a lot of that brighter tone to give our ground a little bit of something in there. And then before we finish up, let's add some highlight just to those areas. So we'll go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors and grab the bottom of the first column. We'll go back to our soft airbrush. So we'll go back to airbrushing and the soft brush. Bring that size right down, probably down to around about a 1 or 2%. You're looking for where you've got these sort of areas here that are underneath our lantern. So I'm going to brighten up on here with a light amount of pressure. If you struggle with pressure sensitivity, just lower your opacity using this slider here. And I'm going to go ahead and just add in a general lighter tone on top of those red tones, because you don't want to add it in the dark tone that we just introduced, because they're now just sacrificed to the shadows. So we're going to go ahead and just brighten up some of these grooves in the ground here that just give us a little bit of light, a little bit on there too. A little bit on there, pushing that up to there, and that should just help some of your ground just get a little bit brighter because of the lantern. So we're going to go ahead and just bring the brush size to about 2%, just brightening it up in general just a little bit more, and potentially just exaggerate it a tiny bit further. So just bring it a little bit further, because we can go to our layers and create one more new layer. We'll go to our layer, change the blend mode to add. Set the size down to around about, say, a 1 or 2%, if not smaller, to be honest. And then you're just going to brighten up the brightest areas. So right on that top surface here, you can tap and do all sorts of little sort of wiggles in there if you want to. They're just the brightest spots to add in more detail or keep it nice and smooth. It's totally up to you. You can do a mix like I've just done there. And then I'm just going to lightly blend in some color in the ground, only over here on this left-hand side though. I'm not going to sort of stretch it over to there. I just want the brightest area to sit over there. Now that is done. However, I would personally start to just change a few things. I would go into my ghost group. If you've converted it into one layer, it really doesn't matter. Just create a new layer and clip it to it. And I would grab my multiply layer here, which is the color tone here, top of the second column. Set the brush size to around about, say, a 3 to 4%. And we're just going to get in here and just darken up here. I just want to darken up the underside of the sheet a little bit more, just so it kind of fades into the ground. Maybe getting rid of some of those bright tones over here. In fact, blending it out quite a lot in those areas. Because now we've got our kind of final set of lighting, I can really be quite sacrificial to a lot of these highlight tones and just blend them out into the ground. Just so now the lighting is preserved on that left-hand side. Now let's go ahead and turn off our drawing guide just so we can see our finished design. You can then take a look and see if you want to adjust anything, but I'm happy with mine. So I'm going to pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and you end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this Halloween themed ghost design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them. Instagram's a great place for you to tag me in your finished creations, as well as Facebook. And if you could subscribe to the channel, it would help me out a bunch. So hit the subscribe button down below. And if you want even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon, where I've also got a collection of my previous Halloween tutorials. But that's also where I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. And I've been doing that for years now. And the catalogue is almost over 120 at the time of recording. And you can get access to every single one of those tutorials when you join. So make sure to check that out using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. So thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.